Hey, everybody, how's it going? Welcome to Down the Rabbit Hole podcast. I'm your host, Rob Turley, co founder, co CEO at White Rabbit Intel. And I have a very special guest here who is a guru in the HR world, which is very exciting. And I know HR is a really scary word, and it should not be. And he is a very large advocate for the fact of why it shouldn't be, what we're doing wrong, what needs to be done, and how to deal with HR in a remote access area, how using psychology is actually the answer to good HR because people are people and the way that they think actually matters. That's what should matter. And how using AI can potentially create a very large solution in that case. So I have Denis Barnard here with us. He is the director of HR Means Business and GreenRiver Technology. So please, Denis, introduce yourself.
Right. Thanks very much, Rob, for that huge build-up. I'll try not to disappoint anybody. Yeah, I'm an HR specialist, been in it for many, many years, far too many years. I migrated or refugeed from finance into HR because I wanted to change. And since then, I've seen a lot of things. And my career, if you like, in the technological started in '84 when somebody said, "Could you computerize the payroll?" I said, "Sure." And I did that. And ever since then, they've been asking me things like, "Oh, well, you know about that stuff. Could you deal with it?" So I'm a specialist really on the selection and implementation of HR technology and associated tools. And that's where I am right now. So anything you want to ask me, you can always do so.
Perfect, perfect. So you are a disruptor in the space, and a
You
man of your age usually is not a disruptor, which is part of what makes it so damn impressive. So, what are you doing right now that is bringing to light the disruption of HR, especially in a remote environment? What's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing that I firmly believe in, is well, I've worked remotely for 20 years, and it works for me, and it's done me the power of good because it means that I work at my pace. I work on the days that I work optimally. Some days we all know we get up and you feel like rubbish, and we don't want to work, and but the normal system drives us into the office, a 4 hour a day commute one way or the other. So remote is going to work and remote is here to stay, but it's not for everybody. Um, I've noticed in my friends and colleagues over the last 6 or 7 months, some have clearly deteriorated and they've been very upfront about it. I've noted that experience. So I think there's a lot of work got to go into identifying those who are going to work best. And, use of psychology and psychometric testing has got to be part of it. There are environmental factors, you've got to have a decent setup in your own home. And, even down to the granular stuff, the really personal stuff. If you've got domestic situations that are not working for you, the worsening is going to be exacerbated when you're 24/7 together. So it's definitely here to stay. My vision for the future, if you like, people are talking about the new normal. People are talking about the hybrid solution. Oh, well, yeah, I'm going to come into the office 3 days a week and work from home the other two and so on. I don't see that working because on a Friday, when the finance director comes strolling around the social zone where we all pop in now and again and they see it empty because it will be, they'll say, "Why am I paying for the space?" My vision, if you want, of a hybrid would actually be the locating of individual offices, the sort of WeWork, Regus concept, little honeycombs of offices where individuals can go and work close to home, 10, 15, 20-minute drive, nice, easy journey. And it gets them out the house, which I think is the key, the key part. So everybody then says, "Well, yeah, what's going to happen to all these ghost cities?" Well, whatever happens to them, I'm no great lover of cities, I say, at the best of times. But what it will do will be a huge boost to local economies. So that Starbucks that you buy at a huge rate, apologies to Starbucks, that you buy at a huge cost close to the office, you'll actually be doing it in the Starbucks near to your home or near to that little space where you work, which is a close, easy journey from your home. So I think that'll be the way of the future. The whole,
Absolutely.
the
Absolutely.
whole
I could
rider,
not agree
yeah,
more there. And with that thing that you said about Starbucks and everything, there are a lot of places that are really suffering when it comes to small areas. I mean, I know in the US, and it's like this everywhere else too, I'm sure of it,
yeah,
are areas that are not industry enabled, areas that do not have businesses that are profitable or specialized anywhere near them, is that those cultures and those areas are often failing, and that increases crime rate, it increases drug use, it
yeah,
increases drug dealing, it increases issues with the people that are there, because
yeah,
poverty is one of the number one causes of those things. And if we're able to work from anywhere, and that includes those backwoods places or places that are
totally.
highly remote, that is going to improve everybody's type of life that they live, right?
I absolutely agree. I think, what has happened, certainly in the UK, which I've seen over my lifetime, is the rise of what we call dormitory towns, because most of the work is concentrated in the large cities. The large cities are too expensive for people to live in, so they migrate to the rural areas, which we call dormitory towns, which nobody buys anything there except at the weekend. So those economies are very fragile. This could actually change the whole thing, but there is a big rider to this, and it's up to governments to get hold of this. Where I'm based in South America at the moment, the internet service is very patchy. It serves the cities up to an extent, but there's even places in the UK and the continent where there should be good coverage outside of the cities is up and down. Governments have to lean on the providers to ensure genuine national minimal 4G coverage. Because it ain't going to work otherwise. If you're going to let the rural areas struggle along with 3G, it's a dead duck. So now governments have to take the initiative and say, right, we want coverage. You want the license to operate and provide a service of internet and telephony. You have to dedicate yourself to a nationwide coverage. It's not even negotiable. It's got to be the way forward.
Right. And sure, it's expensive, but in the end, it's actually going to boost the economy. It's just that no
Cool.
one wants to foot the upfront cost ever.
Mhm.
It's too expensive. Oh, no, we don't want to pay for that. It's a waste of money. Well, it's going to make you way more money. The
Exactly.
old saying, as it goes, you need to spend money to make money, right?
Exactly, and operating these things over time has actually proved as a license to print money. So there's no reason why they should. Governments actually exact a huge price for these operating licenses. They don't ask for much in return. So I think that so they lower the price. They lower the price for the operating license, but with the rider that you are going to give us a truly national service. It's as simple as that. But this is the future. I estimate that 20% of what are now office work, work jobs, are going to go remote over a fairly short space of time. There are a number of functions that can be actually done quite easily, given the fact that the conditions are right. And I think that will probably accelerate the time. So it's a good thing anyway. I think the people who have managed to benefit from this have actually done very well. I've noticed amongst those who haven't had a bad reaction, they are far happier in what they do. And I think that's kind of matching our biorhythms in a way, isn't it, to the work activity. So all good stuff. It's got to be. So forget that new normal. I mean, this stuff about the new normal, in a way, is the establishment trying to impose new rules on us again.
That's
The new,
right. And there is no normal. Normal
no,
doesn't exist. What is normal? Can you answer that question? Not a
no.
single person can answer that question, because normal is an opinion based off of what society has reflected upon you.
Absolutely spot on. There is no new normal. I can tell you, we can see the figures now. The pandemic is still bobbling around the place. It's going to be with us for quite some while. And
Yeah.
whatever the causes and reasons of this one, and I've seen many speculations about it, I think this is going to become a feature of our lives, periodically, increasingly so.
Yep. And there is no normal. There is only change.
Exactly. It's going to be a kaleidoscope. In a sense, the contracts that we make with our employees, or however that works, are the only standardized part will probably be how many hours of work how many hours a week are you going to work? Then let's discuss how that's distributed.
Right. But so from your side of things in HR, now, how many hours are you going to work is going to dictate a contract. Okay. But how do you prove that someone's working without tracking them? Because tracking someone's hours is invasive and ineffective, and they feel obligated to do work that is actually efficient and effective. What is your thought on that and how HR is going to go from a remote environment? Because tracking hours is not effective.
Right. Okay. There are two sides to this coin, actually. Yes, tracking has to be done. But I think that let's go wind back a bit and say, if the contract is arranged in such a way that it suits the person, let's posit a case of somebody who agrees with the company, they will be available to work between the hours of 8 in the morning and 6 in the evening. However, because of their domestic commitments, maybe they have children, maybe they have an aged relative, whatever it is they got to do, they're actually going to take a whole of 3 hours out the middle of the day, each day. So that really all boils back to 35 hours a week, distributed in a way that suits that person. Now,
Absolutely. That's my company, for example. What we do is
yeah,
that your hours of availability are dictated by you. As long as you're
yeah,
working a certain amount of time and putting in a certain amount of effort, that's fine. You could take a 3 hour break in the middle of the day. You can work at 2 in the morning. We don't care as long as the work gets done and you're communicative.
I agree. Now, when you say working 2 in the morning, now that's something you see. First of all, if the contracts work in favor of the employee, they're less likely to abuse it. Secondly, my view on tracking is not so much a sort of punitive one. It's actually related to employee wellness, because I know from all those empirical discussions I had, that people, when they were released from the daily commute, wow, I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and start hitting the keyboard, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, because they're enjoying themselves so much, so because they've got the freedom, they are actually overworking. And I know every employer will be licking their lips at this, but it's not sustainable. Some of my friends worked stupid hours for the first few weeks and they burned themselves out. So the tracking, in a sense, has got to be as a form of protecting the employee. And my view is technology should do this. Technology in the form of business systems should actually say, hi, Dennis, you've been working at the screen for 2.5 hours now. And in a few minutes time, we're actually going to sign you out for 10 minutes or 15, go take a walkabout, take a break, have a banana shake, whatever it is you want to do, but get away from it. And I think that's where, AI technology is going to help, because outside of, shall we say, those contracted 8 to 6, somebody might well want to work at night. What would happen ordinarily at, say, 5:45 is say, hello, your hours are for the day are pretty much up. So make sure you save what you're doing. We're going to sign you out the system at 6. If you want to go on working, fill in this automated log, will go to the machine. It will be logged there that you have requested to do some extra work outside of your hours, no problem, but it will be kept. In other words, if you burn out because you have actually requested to work too many hours, then it's less liability on the company. So it's not so much a question of tracking what they're doing. It's actually ensuring that they're not doing too much over a period of time. I know, as employers love to think that everybody's slaving away at 4 a.m. on the screen, but it ain't sustainable, and it's going to load a lot of liability problems down the stream.
Making time for yourself is so important, because
Yeah.
you cannot give increase unless you have something to give. If you have nothing left to give and you're giving too much, then there's nothing to give to anybody or yourself. So you need to take care of yourself. For example, my company we're very into the whole remote thing. The reason why is because we're a fully remote company. We always have been, always will be. And that was before the pandemic or anything like that. And we have time tracking, but there actually is no admin for the time tracking. You track the time so that you can make sure that you're not overworking, just like you were saying, everything like that. So you're not overworking, so that you are in line with what your goals are, what you want to do, and how you want to achieve it. And how you track that is totally up to you. It is a personal thing. People don't want to work 16 hours a day. Sure, they will, because they're super motivated. All they're thinking about is their work. Fantastic. They're very passionate. But having them actually see how much work they're doing when it comes to a time perspective is a whole different story from, getting absorbed into a work and then boom, it's 3 a.m.
Yeah. I mean, the 16-hour day, we all do that, but
Mm-hmm.
not day in, day out. And those are the times when we're really hitting the straps. We've got something, a big project on, we're doing something really interesting, we get into it, but not day in, day out for weeks. No way. That's it doesn't work for us as a species. We can't possibly do it, And so you're right. I mean, what I'm looking at, I've got a small little group which we're working on at the moment, looking at all the aspects of remote. That will include, we've got a specialist in exercise. We've got somebody who's going to think about the nutritional side, because I can tell you, most of my pals have put on, a few pounds over this because they're not eating properly, for heaven's sake. They're not getting out and about. They need to get out and walk around to breathe some air. So it's a lot of that is self-motivation, self-discipline, or self-preservation, we could almost say. So there's so much more to it. What appeared to be a hunk of gold was the most wonderful thing, and it can be in the right hands, the right environment, but it could be a killer in some cases. So we really need to. So it's not a question of tracking, what you're doing. Somebody once described culture. This is perfect. Culture is about, what happens when the boss isn't there. And so how does stuff work when the boss isn't there? And that's where the culture, the stuff that we all know, the way we want to work, as in White Rabbit, for instance, you've got the right philosophy. And I think that's the sort of philosophy that's going to roll out across the place, because it's the only one that works. It works for people.
I would also say that if people are not comfortable, where if the culture is happening when the boss isn't there, it's not a very good culture, and it's not a very good leadership style, because if they cannot be themselves around their bosses, that's a pretty poisonous environment, and it's from the top down. They'll feel like they would have to be somebody that they're not, which is not healthy.
Yeah, exactly.
And what you were saying, when it comes to the self-motivation and the self-preservation, humans by history are not that great at self-preservation. They're great at preserving their species, but they're awful at preserving themselves. So an important aspect, especially from, an HR implementation of an org psychologist, is super important. And it's something that not many people do. It's considered a luxury, but guess what? People, especially in a remote environment, and especially because they need to self-preserve, they need something like that. They need someone to talk to. They need somebody to hear them, to understand the problems, and to understand where, usually if you're in an environment where you're working from an office, you can see where the politics are. You can understand who doesn't like each other, whatever, where the issues are, if there's communication problems. But with a remote environment, that's where a lot of issues are going to come up, where people are not talking to each other. People may go dark. People may not notice that people are having a bad day, or if they're not in the right headspace, that their mindset is off, that the positivity has done a complete nosedive, that this person is thinking of quitting or doing something ridiculous, or they're overworking themselves to death. How are you supposed to understand that if you're not standing next to them, if you can't see their face?
I absolutely agree. I mean, some outfits have tried to mitigate this sort of effect by having endless Zoom meetings. I don't think that's the solution.
That's called wasting time.
In a sense, it is. I mean, even in the old office environment, meetings were the great industry. Zoom meetings are actually very tiring. You need a psychologist and some very good managers who can check in with their people in a let's say in an understanding way. It's not to check in and say, are you working? It's to check in and say, how's it going? Talk it through. It means dedicating possibly more time to the individual than you did in an office environment. But the yield from that is much greater, I would say. You're minimizing the risk of burnout or isolation or whatever. So those are the sort of services you really need to have, that check-in system, and a good, a one-to-one check-in system, getting the whole team ranged across 3 continents, jabbering away on Zoom every other day. It's just no good. It's got to be more personalized. But
So
the
some
whole
things that
culture, the
some
whole
things
culture has to be structured so that at the beginning, rather as you've got, your culture appears to be well thought out and well developed. And that's what needs to be in place before you can even embark on this.
Right. Some things that could be done. For example, we've done this in the past, and other companies that we've worked with that we know, and people that I know that work at other businesses do this. Where, for example, having a movie night, a watching party. We're going to be having a Matrix watching party very soon. That's awesome. So we get to watch it together. We get to comment on it. We're all on Zoom, but we're not looking at the Zoom call. What we're doing is that we are watching the movie together, and we're
Yeah.
commenting as if we're talking to each other in a movie
Yeah.
theater or something like that. As far as having happy hours where everybody can just get drunk and
Yep.
have a conversation and laugh and everything like that. It's not on the books. It's it's like the water cooler times 10.
Yeah.
It's fantastic, and they're in the comfort of their own home, which allows them to actually open up more.
Yes.
So
That's right.
these things have massive benefits, and they sound pretty stupid, or you think that people won't go. They will go, and they'll really enjoy themselves. And if they haven't gone, they'll hear such stories about it that they'll want to go next time, and it will motivate them to go. And you will see a larger audience at your corporate events than
Yeah.
ever before, because people don't have to take time out of their day. They don't have to leave their house. They don't have to try to plan something. They don't need a babysitter. They could just get it done right there.
Absolutely. And that is the way. And there's a whole range of ways. You can have people playing chess together. You can have people reading books together. You can have, there's a whole range of activities. You just need to get, the right people in the right activities in a way. Yeah,
Right.
the idea of getting drunk online sounds quite interesting. I don't think I've gone quite that far. I think the furthest we've got in our family, in our enlarged family circle, is sending each other pictures of the cocktails we were drinking, but none matter that we didn't actually see the effects of them. So, no, I like it. It's
Right.
part
Right.
of that culture, it's the culture.
There's one rule. There's one rule to it. You
Uh,
cannot join the call unless you have a drink visibly in your hand.
Well, I think that's eminently, sensible. How else could it be good?
Right, right. It's incredibly useful. Also, there's online games where it's almost like board games, trivia, stuff like that, where it's
Yeah,
all interactive that you could set up and you can just do it through Discord. And then you can have that screen share through there with the volume, and everybody could be playing because it's an internet-based game in the first place. It's a household internet-based game where
yeah,
people are supposed to be in the room together, but why can't you do it remote?
no, absolutely. The things are endless, and they do involve people. I think that's the trick is getting people involved, but without these great big Zoom calls and so on. So yeah,
Right.
no,
So
I think we're in a good place.
absolutely. And moving forward, I would like to ask, what are the most common misconceptions of HR, not only in remote, but why do you think it's the case, and what mistakes have been made? Why has it gotten such a bad name, and how can we debunk these myths?
Right, wow, that's a big one. I hope we got a few more hours. Um, I think, most of where this comes from, and this goes back over a long time, is that there has never been a very clear picture in most people's minds of what HR actually is meant to do. Traditionally, going back about 50 or 60 years, it was something to do with welfare, um, making sure that everybody was happy and all that stuff. And when people were weepy, they went to the personnel office and so on. And this sort of all grew. And because there were kind of inferiority complex, because nobody knew what the mission was, they then started taking on a miscellany of administrative tasks which didn't add value. Somebody had to do them, and somebody said, well, I'll give it to those guys. What else can they do? And so that built up. And what happened over time is it became a sort of a shell, a carapace, if you like, which was actually a comfort zone. So when you spoke to an HR person and said, how's things? Oh, no, it's hellish. I'm all day in interviews, and I'm thinking, well, why aren't the managers doing that? And they say, no, you wouldn't give this to the managers. Good Lord, they'll make a mess of it. And I said, well, doesn't that tell us something about what we should be doing is getting these guys trained? So the HR firefighting thing has always been a great excuse for not achieving very much. We're saying, look at all the value we're adding. We're doing all this admin. So that's kind of how it grew up. The misconceptions are that HR manages the workforce, which it doesn't. HR manages HR people, nothing more than that.
That's right. And operations manages all of the processes, and then each director of each department or each VP of each department manages that workforce. HR has nothing to do with it. They're just making sure that things are running smoothly and that people are communicating properly.
Well, that's right. I mean, I see the mission quite clear. I mean, we don't fire people either. And really, in my universe, hiring people should be down to experts in recruitment, in sourcing candidates, and the actual hiring should be done by the hiring managers. My view of the mission of HR has always been as an enabler. A year or two back, I wrote something called the 3 laws of HR, tech, which said, look, you're responsible for getting the right HR systems, make it run properly with the data correct, and make sure the information is available. So it's not an HR system. It doesn't belong to HR. We operate it to enable the information for the rest of the organization who needs it. And that should be the same for everything. Line managers should be properly trained so they don't fire people because they don't like the color of their eyes. They have to be trained to understand how to manage people. That's an HR task, is enabling the systems to work, to make sure that everybody will perform optimally, that they're able to develop people, how we understand how people will perform, how we can make them perform better in a sustainable context. So that's the mission. HR people somewhat obsessed with getting a seat on the board and having influence. I mean, the other day I actually saw an article entitled "How Your HR System Can Help You Get a Seat on the Board." Well, that's just downright crazy. That system belongs to the organization. It's not there to leverage yourself into a position of power. So it's enabling. And, many people will say, well, that's not very sexy. Well, no, it ain't. But if it's done right, your organization is really going to take off. It's going to be working itself as it should be optimally and with minimum risk and liability. If your managers are managing the people properly, you have reduced legal and liability problems. So you think about it in that context, where we should be the people that are the glue to make it all hold together and run properly. And they say HR will lead change. No, it doesn't. The things that actually lead change are usually market conditions. If your product's not selling, HR ain't going to solve your problems. And again, some of the things in HR you see. I'll give you a very famous case. One of the big banks in the UK, founded in 2008, 2009. The HR director, who was a very high profile, highly respected person in the HR profession, actually said that the failure of the bank had nothing to do with HR. Well, my answer to that, which didn't get a hell of a lot of publicity, but it still holds today, is if you had no influence on the business, then that's an indictment of HR. And if you did have an influence on the business, clearly it didn't work. So it's a catch-22. You've got to own up to the responsibility. if you're an HR director on a board run by some rampaging power maniac, you've got to stand up to be counted. One of the people I admire in HR is Laurie Ruderman, and she says in one of her podcasts, look, whose side are you on? You're going to be on the right side or the wrong side. At some point, just because you've got credit card debts and a mortgage and all of that, don't sacrifice your principles. Stand up and be counted. And and that's where we haven't been very good in the past. I've stood up to be counted and had my head chopped off a few times, but I'd rather live with the principles, because once you sacrifice those principles, it never stops there. So
that's right. Once you start, there is no stop to it. You have to stand up for what you believe in. But then again, that's a little bit of a catch-22 as well, I would say, because everything, there is no right or wrong. What you think is right or wrong is only an opinion, and it's a bias. Everything is a shade of gray when it comes to the reality of it. And that's also another thing that's damaging, not only to a business, but society, is understanding that everything is a shade of gray. But usually that's from the lack of education, or it's from the lack of acceptance, often denial.
I have to say, I've often had, as I got really ancient, I found this idea of the shades of gray is probably not so the case. I actually believe that things in life are actually black and white. It's yes or no, it's whatever. I think it's our doubts and our inner self, our weaknesses, if you like, that paint these things a shade of gray to try and water down the hardness of yes or no, right or wrong. I think we try and fuzz it a bit with the gray bit. That's as I found as I got older. Here's the man who's more grey than anybody, but there we are.
Right.
But I think it comes back to our principles and our values. I think all organizations have to have values. All individuals have to understand and follow those values. My business partner, who retired just a short while ago, I mean, she and I share the same values. When we set up the company all those years ago, we said, we're not going to have company cars. We're not going to have healthcare schemes. If we want those things, we're going to buy them out of the money we earn. And why? Because why should clients pay for this stuff? You have overheads, and all of that get passed on to the clients. Now, of course, the client's going to pay for some stuff. They're paying for your expertise, but I don't see why they should be paying for you to have a $80,000 car or whatever. That's incidental. So those are the values that we look at. I never travel first class if I'm working for a client. I'll always go second class. It doesn't worry me. I wouldn't stay in a 5-star hotel either. So it's something that gets into your brain about how that works. Those are your values, and those are the things you kind of stick to. And that's about the culture, and that culture. HR doesn't set the culture. That's another misunderstanding. HR doesn't set the culture. The culture starts at the top. If the person at the top is a serial sexual harasser, forever padding the expense account, all of that stuff, then a liar or whatever, that culture seeps down to every single pore in the organization.
Absolutely. It's always from the top down. Is that
Totally.
If there's a culture issue, there's usually a leadership issue almost every single time.
I absolutely agree. Because in the absence of good leadership, you've got a vacuum. Little cultures spring up. And you will see that mostly in large corporations where they are so enormous subdivisions that every division has its own little warlord, its own culture, and so on, almost at war. How many organizations have I been in where the people in HR say, oh, those people in accounts, they just don't understand. They're always messing us about. The people in IT say, those idiots in HR, they come. And so you've got these kind of armed camps when really all should be pulling together and say, this is our mission. This is what we've got to be doing. Let's work with these people, for goodness sake.
Right. It all starts from the mission and the vision. If everybody has the same vision and the same mission, working toward the same goal that they truly understand,
Yes.
then things will start to coincide with one another and people will understand each other. And I like how you said warlords. That's really funny because it is kind of like that.
It
They
is,
would be
isn't it?
called silos, really.
Yeah, silos.
Silos get established or whatever. But I like warlords better. That's really funny because
Well, you normally know there's a problem when you go into an organization and there in the lobby or the reception area is a great big plaque with the mission statement written on it, telling the world this is our mission statement. It usually says underneath, and if you threaten or harass our workers, we shall kill you. Now, why would you threaten or harass the workers? Usually because some irate person is going to go in there and say this service has been terrible. So it, the stated idea and the actual idea is usually has a great gap in between.
that is the truth. That is the truth. Absolutely. And so to move more toward the, I guess, psychological side of things, how is psychology going to affect the HR market and the industry itself from a positive perspective? What differences can that make, and why isn't it there?
Well, we sort of moved away in a little way from psychology in shall we say the more industrialized nations. Now here, for instance, in certain countries in South America, selection is very much determined by the results of psychologists' psychological testing, which I think is over the top. I think psychology is going to be very important in the management of remote workforces. No two ways about that. And I think that's where it's got to start, is by saying, let's see who is going to be deployed remotely or who we're going to recruit remotely. And we need to understand them. What are their behaviors likely to be under certain circumstances? What are the lenses that we need to apply to the results of our test batteries that are going to identify those who are going to do well? Now, if you actually get that working properly, your chances of failure, and failure is not so much failure for the organization as possible disaster for the employee, you're going to minimize the risk. Psychology for our, shall we say, our more conventional office based or workplace based people, I'm not so sure. I think that underneath it all is I've been sort of dubious about artificial intelligence. I have to say, and you probably know this, Rob. I've been saying AI, unless we can find out what it's going to do for us, it's a toy, and it's very good. But what do we need now? When we look at the psychology, if there's one thing that we know in organizations, there is bias. There is bias that we don't know about. It doesn't show.
That's kind of the definition of bias, is it not? It's an opinion that you're not aware of that's tied to one of
Yes,
your beliefs, morals, or
correct.
values that you believe due to the way that you were either raised, and it was the beliefs of the people who raised you, such as your parents
Yep,
or your legal guardian or whatever have you. And it's also the beliefs that are instilled by the society that you live in, depending on what type of culture that you're immersed in.
totally. You see, the point about bias is it's not easily identifiable because it doesn't have any major showdowns. It's not easy. If a client if a candidate from an ethnic background or a female gender or something is rejected, that's easily identified. But bias works by stealth. It's a it's it's a problem by 1,000 cuts. It's tiny little cuts that build up to become a big unconscious problem. And so, therefore, that's why I see artificial intelligence, you know, changing from it will identify where we have this nexus of problems. And this is very much going to be my approach to clients and organizations to say, look, if you're above a certain size, it could work for any size. But I think the bigger you are, the less you are aware of the problem because it's not so focused, is it? So we need AI to plug into what we know, and it will tell us quickly that we are not paying females enough, or people from certain ethnic backgrounds aren't being promoted enough, and so on. All of this type of bias, this sort of recruitment bias and management bias, has to be teased out. Artificial intelligence is the way forward, as far as I can see.
Yes.
It tells us quickly.
AI has no thought. It has no bias. It has no opinion. It has no beat into the system issues, but this would only really be unsupervised machine learning. Supervised machine learning is bias built in to get to an objective or a goal. That's not what you want. You want it to look at all the data that's there, then tell you what's happening. That's
Yes.
the biggest thing. And that's what we need, is to take the bias out of the system. It literally needs to be out of the system. Although the data was put there by humans, therefore it is biased, but then you'll be able to plainly see the bias that is there.
That's the whole point. And I think this is the way to go. Once you understand what the bias is and you know it's there, you then have to start a program of trying to tease it out of the system, however way you do it, trying to get the problem out in the open and explain why it's unacceptable. The whole idea of bias, in a way, is not good for the organization. The organization not only will have stated public aims about how we're a diversity, inclusion, employer, blah blah blah, at the very heart of it.
I do want to add to that.
Sure.
Diversity inclusion is bias. It is the absolute heart of bias, where, oh, we need more of this ethnicity to work for us. Oh, we need more women to work for us to make it even. That is bias at heart. It's because we made so many mistakes in the past that made it so, oh yeah, like 91% of this company is white and they don't hire people that are whatever have you. It doesn't matter what it is, or they don't hire certain religion or sex or whatever have you. We made, as a species, too many mistakes there. Now this is it snapping back. It's, we need to hire these specific people because we need to look this certain way to society. It's all opinion based. It's all, oh yeah, we don't want to look like we're making mistakes, when really the unbiased opinion is hiring the person, no matter who they are, what sex they are, does not matter, who is best qualified to do the work.
Yep.
So we are actually going backwards in the opposite direction. It's a reverse backwards direction, if you will, when we're trying to hire based off of, oh, we need more of these people included. That's not actually the answer. That is bias, inherently bias in the opposite direction of bias.
Yes, that is the way. I mean, the ideal way, if you're recruiting, is to have anonymized candidates, in a way that that they get through the first cut, if you like, because on the balance of their merit. Unfortunately, there is a stage at which you're going to have to come face to face with a person in some form or another, and that's when the bias could enter. But I agree. I'm not. I think the worst thing that we get in this whole argument is tokenism. That is the absolute. Even for people who feel that they're discriminated against, the whole idea of tokenism is anathema to them, because that kind of just is a caricature of the problem. So I think AI is going to help solve this problem if
I agree.
applied correctly. And I think, and that's why, from being a bit of a skeptic about this, to trying to present how is the business case for this going to work, before I could see that AI would possibly work for very, very large organizations. But I can see that can scale down now.
As being an expert in that space, though, the how is actually not relevant at all. It's not about the how. The more people think about the how, the more bias that's built into the system. It's the what. What is going to work, not the how. The how should be determined by the machine, because as soon as the how is determined by the person, it's now bias. It's the what. What data needs to be looked at. The how will be determined by the unbiased approach of the machine itself.
I think there's a mission for you at White Rabbit to explain this and get this across in some form. So certainly the HR community are going to find this very helpful. I think that the contribution that your type of product is going to make to HR is immeasurable. It's really excellent.
Oh, once we
So
start working on that side of things, we're still on sales enablement for now.
I know. Yeah, enablement. That's really what it's about for me. Not everybody will agree, of course. You know, I think when people say to me, "Well, there's been some good. What are the good aspects of HR over the years?" I think the rise, specifically the rise of really great champions of challengers, if you like, for HR. As I
Hmm.
mentioned, there's Laurie Ruderman, Jason Averbook, Tim Sackett, Kelly Swingler. These sort of people have risen out and say, "Hey, you know, HR isn't like this at all. You guys have all got it wrong. It's about the other thing." And then there are varying ideas within this, but the challenge needs to be made because we couldn't go on like that. When we look at the flip side of the coin, the institutes globally of HR have not served their members well. It's a terrible thing to say, but much of them they've been stuck in the old ways. They've been out there, postulating, disrupting, and all that stuff. But in fact, they're the guys being disrupted by those very people I've mentioned. Um, so that, in a way, has changed. That's becoming a new normal. Is the challenging of the institutes. The institutes, I have to say, have not done a very good job, shall we say, in the arena of HR tech. I never learned anything from these guys in HR tech. I had to specialize in it myself. And yet, you'll see over the last 25 years how that has been crucial of selecting and implementing systems which the whole organization needs. That data is their lifeblood. And yet that hasn't been the priority, particularly. So,
Absolutely, I could not agree more. And the
yeah,
data availability is the biggest part of it. I mean, what you were saying before, one comment to that is change or die. It's either you're willing to change or you're going to die. That's the end of it. That's anything. That is anything in this known universe. It is the law of nature itself. So it needs to happen. As far as what needs to happen with the data or the HR tech, my opinion, at the very least, for what it's worth, is that AI would solve a lot of things with the HR tech because how do you expect a technology in HR to work for every separate company that has different processes? As you say, they orchestrate their company differently. The composition of how the success of that company is going to be achieved is different every single time. And it's asking too much of human beings to be able to orchestrate that in a data system when it's always different, when there's no one size fits all cookie cutter solution for every single use case. Every business is different. All of their clients are different. Every person who works for that company is different. And the way the people interact with one another and what the goal is different. So, how can one technology that's
yeah.
static, without the ability to learn and make decisions, how is that supposed to be a fully successful system?
Well, what you've touched on there is one of the big problems we've had in the past about selecting HR systems. Um, there are many systems, and many of them look the same. But actually, what people have discovered, which I've told people and they found out for themselves, is actually systems may look the same. Our processes in an organization will be different, but not all those systems can be configured to work to the process that our organization needs.
Bingo.
The presence of a module that records absence doesn't mean it's going to do it for you. It could do for some outfits. That's why, you'll see in LinkedIn, some HR person will say, "Well, can anybody recommend a system?" And I'll say, "Yeah, could you recommend me a car or a holiday? Recommend me a holiday. Oh, well, go climbing in the Alps. Great. Except that, I'm not too mobile thanks to a stroke a couple of years back. So I'll probably want to lie on a beach and read a book." So it's about how do we want to use it? And it's the configurability of systems. And you don't understand the configurability of systems just going into a little bit of masterclass unless you know what your processes are. And if
Right. And the
you've got to
configurability,
yeah,
that can create more problems because if it cannot be configured for what you're trying to achieve, it should
Yeah.
be, the future would be the auto configuration that would form and fit to the processes and the rules, if you
Yeah.
will. If you're
Yeah.
talking from a tech
The
perspective, it's the
rules.
rules set
No. Yeah.
that would create a way for it to function and to be able to adapt and solve problems with the data, or the distribution of the data, or the way that people are interacting, how everything is flowing on its own. It will do it better.
If I read you right, the AI would actually look at the process and rules set for the organization and then get to this piece of software, and providing it's configurable enough, we'll say, okay, ching, 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 which would normally take the project manager from the vendor 7 to 10 days, depending on the preparation that's been gone in by the client, and then the team back in the lab to actually configure to the rules. So in a short space of time, providing the software is suitably configurable, that work is done.
Which is still a half-baked configuration.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to be suitable with that 7-day period of a half-baked process that is based off of the bias of whoever's setting it up.
Yeah.
Why not be able to set all of the rules, feed that into an AI system, and then in less than 5 minutes, you have a fully auto-configured, completely custom to your process, precise to exactly what you do system that is in place and takes care of itself.
I've got a better challenge for you, actually, Rob. Think about this. You get the AI, you get the process maps and rules from the client, and the AI picks all that up. And actually, from a pick list of 1,000 or 2,000 or 30,000 generic items, it builds the software for you.
Right, exactly.
I'm probably talking about stuff that's already been done, but in the HR system world, this would just be a mind blower.
Right, right. I mean, there's a lot of AI systems out there that are able to pull topics and KPIs based off of natural language processing, understanding what the goals are, what's important, everything like that. That is still very much not a fully developed system yet. So
Well, we're in the front row. Then I think the idea would be really good, because first of all, your AI would actually check the processes, looking for inefficiencies, duplications, and time wasters, bottlenecks, and everything. Once it's ironed out the process, said, "Yep, all these process maps work perfectly." Briefing your teams back to that, and then on to build the software from all the components.
It'll be able to tell you what's wrong with it too, because what AI is really good at is crunching numbers and recognizing patterns.
Yeah.
Patterns in a system. An AI is a system. It looks at everything as a system. If you're running a system through a system, it's going to recognize all of the inconsistencies. It's going to help you be able to optimize. It'll be able to discover all those bottlenecks so you can improve your system, because the AI system that now conformed to your business is now going to root out all the problems of what it just conformed to tell you, hey, this is not the best way. It should change to this because this is bullshit.
Yep. I think that's, I'm seeing a great future in HR systems for this. I think it would certainly revolutionize things. It would also reduce the possibility of picking the wrong system, because the system would actually be built bespoke from a whole range of generic items.
It wouldn't be about picking the wrong system. The system would pick you.
Yes. Almost as it came out of my mouth, I thought, my God, it's the other way around completely.
Right. And it wouldn't even pick you. You would just tell it to like, hey, I need a system built, and then it would build it, and it would find all the discrepancies, and then you can update it based off of that. You can see all the metrics, yada yada yada. You can see what everybody's getting paid. And people say, oh no, we have people that are on that. There are data scientists, that are business analysts, our HR analysts that are looking over all this data. So you're going to trust a human being whose brain developed over tens of thousands of years to ignore noise and to make assumptions, to give you the static data on what is correct.
Yeah.
Do you think a human was ever built to sit in front of a computer staring at an Excel sheet for 8 hours a day? You lose your mind. We weren't built to do that. We're easily distracted. We're easily entertained. We easily lose interest.
Yes.
And we are creatures that are intuitive, emotional, and creative. Logic and calculation literally defies the laws of the human being.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And considering that most of our knowledge is actually carted around in this extension of the hand called the cell phone, we're actually using the brain less. A great one of this, to my horror, recently I found that hardly anybody reads maps. They're all with the GPS. But what happens when the signal fails? You're on your way from A to B on a 400-mile trip, and the signal fails.
You're never getting home.
No, you're never going to get anywhere. You're just going to ask at the next gas station, where the hell am I? But I mean, we're losing that. We're atrophying that part of our brain. So what you're saying is quite correct. The tendencies are well, we're going to rely on that. There's nothing to say we shouldn't rely on technology. It's a tool, but we should understand why it's doing what it's doing completely.
Yeah, and the thing is that we should rely on it. In my opinion, we should rely on it because the human brain could be used for so much more. Right now, we just load it up with a bunch of meaningless nonsense that can be solved by a machine in literally less than a millisecond. Why are we wasting all of our brain space? Because we can only know so much. We can only know so much.
The problem is we're using all the excess brain space and watching TikTok and all these other things. We're becoming a species of trivia of nonsense, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. There's a lot of distractions. And to be honest with you, sure, I'm a millennial, but TikTok, I don't think I will ever understand the entertainment value of that app. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like, what even is that? What am I doing? It's a total waste of my time.
It's just another manifestation of the narcissism of our times, I'm afraid.
That was extremely well put.
Thank you so much. I made it up there on the spur of the moment, but you can use a quote anytime you like. Well, but yeah, I mean, you can, I think it's symptomatic. It's symptomatic. The so-called reality shows, the so-called shows of selecting of musicians and all this stuff. It's cheap television occupying our minds, isn't it? It's entertaining us.
Right. I mean, they're also scraping all of our data. For those of you who don't know, China owns TikTok, and they are stealing all of the data that you have ever aggregated in your entire life, and they are using it to their advantage. Not, I'm saying, in the advantage of China, but in the advantage of advertising, in the advantage of understanding human nature, so that you're easily more targeted and influenced by things. And it's not China. I'm not saying anything about China doing that. It's just that it's one of the things that are happening, and it's happening in tech with tech companies that are social media driven and message based driven all over the world. Doesn't matter where it's at, but that's what's happening. In case you don't know, all the listeners out there, Facebook does the same thing. They've been selling your data for years. They know more about you than you do.
Yeah, I mean, we had that with Facebook and Cambridge Analytics.
Oh, Cambridge Analytics.
Yeah,
if Facebook didn't exist, it would have never happened. So, little fun fact. Okay, let's get into this. So, Cambridge Analytics, which I'm sure you're very familiar with as you are from the UK. Mm-hmm. Cambridge Analytics is the reason the Brexit happened. You're welcome. Yes, if you didn't know, it is the reason. It is the reason it happened, because what they did is that they did mass media influence based off of reading all of Facebook's data about people and then using psychographic analytics in order to understand how to message those people to influence them to think certain ways or vote in a certain direction. That is one of the largest scale things that has ever been done with AI. That was banned. The company was disbanded. It was made illegal by the UN. Where the founders of that company went, nobody really knows, but they pretty much ruined the B2C space for artificial intelligence for everybody.
Yeah. But probably just as well. I mean, what, for instance, I don't care for the way that Google Analytics or Google Ads or whatever it is works. I personally, and perhaps I'm a bit of an old crust, but I see that as a tax on online businesses.
It is. It's a way for Google to make money off of everybody.
Yeah, and it is a tax. I'm not a great believer in taxes particularly, but it's unfortunate that a company that starts up actually has to pump large amounts of money into Google or into people who are going to configure Google. Of course, Google changes the rules every 5 minutes, so you can make a significant investment. I launched a company called a comparison website in 2009 called HR Comparison. And to crank it up, I had to pour quite a bit of money into to get it into the space it needed to be. Fortunately, it got a lot of traction by one mean or another, but I really begrudged paying that money. It didn't make a lot of sense to me. But if you're not in the game, you don't stand a chance, do you? I think
that's not entirely true. So part of what we do with our technology is that it is an outbound world, and digital media marketing is just straight up not effective. If you have a $20 million budget, let's say, you can see some results, but your conversion rate in the end is only going to be 1% of all those engagements is going to turn into a sale, and that's if you're damn good at it.
Yeah.
It's not effective. It's just not. You need to be getting your marketing content in front of the people, which is a much smaller demographic that your salespeople have the ability to sell to, because there needs to be that engagement. No one just is interested. Interest never sold anybody anything. They're just interested. They're just interested to see what it looks like, and then go, "Oh, that's really cool." Click, 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 click. Hundreds of dollars. Ding, 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 ding. Guess who's making all the money? Google's making all the money, because guess what? You're a sucker.
Yep.
That's what it is. It needs to get in front of people. It could be done way better. And to add to, nobody likes that Google changes the rules, but it's actually them being fair. I know quite a bit about this stuff. The reason they change the rules is because people learn how to manipulate and use the system to their advantage, where it's almost like cheating. The reason they change the rules is so people cannot lock into that cheating state, and so that it's a more fair digital advertising market for everybody. If they didn't do that, the enterprises would have they'd have everybody by the throat.
Yeah, I can see that. It's rather like how people learn to beat the parsing machines in recruitment, using the keywords, and you end up with somebody you don't want in front of you.
That is the symptom of a broken system, and it was a symptom of a lazy solution to something that people didn't have a solution to automate.
Yep. And we will always take, as a species, we'll always take the lazy solution, because in business, when you're talking about people who are salaried people, they don't like carrying the can. So therefore, the best way of avoiding that is not to make a decision. They will then say, well, the recruitment software said that this was the best guy, or the artificial intelligence, if you like, they'll be saying this in years to come. Well, they told us this would be the right system. So, the abdication of responsibility comes very naturally to people in the hierarchies of corporations. So that, and that's why, that's the danger, if you like, when people start leaning on this too much without actually thinking about why they're doing it.
Yeah, it's all about the reason it's built and what it's for. And to say, like you said, with humans are inherently lazy. So is the rest of the universe. I mean, if anybody here knows anything about physics, the laws of physics in entropy and enthalpy, the universe exists in a chaotic, lazy state. That is nature. Every type of nature. Well-coordinated business is defying the laws of nature. So it's always trying to come apart and become lazy and chaotic. It's like that in anything that you look at, anything that exists. So keeping that in mind, if you're running a very well-tuned business, you are defying the laws of nature. But yeah.
I would actually apply that to sports teams as well. I mean, that we have soccer in the UK where managers are on a sort of carousel. Managers join a team, they do really well. In the end, they fail. It's like, it's inevitable you're going to fail. The team you had ages, or, you lose key players. And I guess it's probably the same in football in the US. You get great managers who eventually fail. It's just the law of the universe, isn't it?
That's exactly right. And even if you had a team of all the best players, if you didn't have someone to manage them properly to create order, all they're going to do is butt heads, not work together. They'd be the worst team in the league.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we've had soccer managers who have made their names by actually having 11 fairly average guys out there on the field, but they worked together and they went places. And these, in a way, are the real guys, aren't they? It's easy to pay somebody and say, buy me the 11 finest footballers in the universe. But that doesn't mean they're going to work as a team. And we've seen that in some clubs in the UK.
That's exactly right.
businesses work exactly the same.
Yeah.
You'll see
And
some entrepreneur who goes a bridge too far and it blows up in their face,
that's right. Same thing with American baseball. The Yankees, it's all just their entire team is made up of a bunch of rookies that are really high performing players with really good management. Why do you think they have 26 rings?
Yep, yep.
That's it.
It's an art form. It's an art form. It's rather like being the conductor of an orchestra who've never rehearsed before.
Mhm.
You eventually get them to work together, play together, and merge together. It's a great skill. I
Yeah,
wish I
it's a
had
beautiful thing.
it.
Oh, I'm sure you do. But this is, I have to say that we are out of time here, but
uh
a lot of fun. Don't worry about it. It's all good. We could always do it again. But everybody out there, thank you so much. And thank you for listening to Down the Rabbit Hole podcast. If you're interested in learning more, there are plenty of episodes out there. There are always going to be more. It's weekly. And I should promote the hashtag DTRH podcast, as well as hashtag follow the white rabbit. So if you follow the white rabbit, you can go down the rabbit hole and see the world for what it really is, right? Thank you so much. If you enjoyed this episode, follow Down the Rabbit Hole podcast for new episodes weekly on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Pandora, and YouTube. If you'd like to apply to be featured on the podcast or recommend a featured guest, please feel free to email us at theteam@whiterabbitintel.com.